there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to talk about an author who has been lauded, prize-winning author, consistently published for the last 40 years, and yet doesn't seem to show up on anyone's radar or be talked about very much. So my question is has anyone actually read Peter Carey? He's published 2 Booker Prize-winning novels, a feat that has been rarely achieved. Hilary Mantel, Jem, however you pronounce his last name, Margaret Atwood, J.G. Farrell, if you count that, and Peter Carey. But apart from those novels, which I'm not sure anyone's read either of them, has anyone read any other work by Peter Carey? And how did this Australian novelist get to the age of 80 with so many books under his belt and yet doesn't seem to show up at all on BookTube? I thought I would talk about my history with Peter Carey, which goes back, the first book of his which I read, which I don't have here because I lent it to somebody about 30 years ago and never got it back, was a book called Illywhacker. This was his second novel, published I think around 85, 86. He had a previous novel called Bliss and some short stories I haven't read. And there's a couple of short story collections. I haven't read any of those. But I remember picking up a copy of Illywhacker. I was in high school, so the last year or two of high school, and it was one of the novels that I said I had read in my application to university, an application which was subsequently unsuccessful at that point. But I had actually read it. It was a modern. I don't think they were that interested. The other one I said I'd read was Wuthering Heights, and then I got called for an interview, and I had to read Wuthering Heights in one afternoon the day before the interview because I hadn't actually read it when I said I read it. But I had actually read Illywhacker. I just don't think it was a contemporary novel. I don't think the Dons. It was at London University. I don't think the professors would have been terribly impressed that I was reading a contemporary novel. Anyway, I had actually read Illywhacker, and it's a wild, a picaresque story told by an old man. Peter Carey is an Australian author, if I haven't made that clear, and writes pretty exclusively about Australia, even though he's lived in the United States, I think, for the last 30 plus years, since about 1990. But all his books have been pretty much about Australia. And Illywhacker was a kind of fun, crazy, shaggy dog novel, which I then lent to somebody and never saw it again. But a couple of years later, he comes out with another novel, which my parents bought me. I've got it here, Oscar and Lucinda. His first, Illywhacker was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and days before they even announced there was a long list, so we already got like 6 shortlisted books, and Illywhacker was on it. And then a couple of years later, we have Oscar and Lucinda. I've got this in hardback. This is actually written to my darling Daniel. Happy Hanukkah, lots of love, Mummy and Daddy, in December 1989. I don't know if that will come up with. So December 89, my parents bought me a hardback book. That's very nice. £10.95 for a hardback book. Hardback books these days are about double that. Unusual. I don't have many other hardback books from this kind of time in my life. And I probably, because I'd already read another book by Peter Carey. I'm not sure if this before. I could probably look up if this is before or after it won the book prize. It may well have been after, although I would have expected to say something on the cover. It does say by the author of Illywhacker, so that book had some impact. And then Oscar Lucinda goes on to win the Booker Prize, and just a bizarre, bonkers novel about a priest who falls in love, but is also an addicted gambler, and then so is Lucinda, the woman he falls in love with. And then there's this mad story of trying to transport a glass church across Australia from one part to another, and that's a bet that he's made. It's bonkers and it's fun and it's a chunky one. I'm not sure how much this gets read anymore, even though it is a Booker Prize winner. I won in 88, I guess. So if I got December 89, it must have already won. Anyway, a chunky novel, which I'm not sure gets read terribly much anymore. This is a classic Faber and Faber cover. Was made into a movie, I think, with Ray Fiennes, Kate Blanchett, early work from both of them. And then looking at it, it's based on, or some of the relationships in it are similar to Edmund Goss, Father and Son, which is a memoir slash biographical work by Edmund Goss about his relationship with his. And I read this many years later because this came up, and maybe it was in my head from the time of Oscar and Lucinda, but years later someone else was talking about Father and Son. I went out and read this and found it very moving and very wonderful. After Oscar and Lucinda, he goes a bit bonkers, but I kept reading him. So there's a whole bunch of novels here up until the second Booker Prize, which I don't even know if these are still in print. You can tell me. I don't know if anyone else ever read them, but I went through them one by one. The Tax Inspector, this I bought in '92, so this I'm still in London. This is around the time I got married. Again, Faber and Faber and paperback. And this was a completely nuts novel, which I found very dense and kind of went over my head. I think I remember lending this to a friend who liked it more than I did. The Tax Inspector by Peter Carey. After that, he goes even more nuts with The Unusual Life of Tristan Smith. And these books are not short, right? Well, this covered in dust, really, really filthy good to sit on the shelf. For this, I bought this in, doesn't say when, but this comes out. Tristan Smith. I bought this in Israel, so this comes out in '94. But I thought I bought this here because this is sort of unusual. This is the standard sized um, um, Faber paperback, and this is a little shorter. I think this is like the international edition. That's why I think I bought this here, but I wasn't yet here in '94, so I'm not sure. And this is completely nutty, allegorical, with two mystical lands making up for Australia and America. And by this time, Peter Carey has moved to America full time. Is living and I think teaching in college in New York. But still very much obsessed with writing about his homeland, writing about Australia. And this is a sort of, as I say, his weird allegorical tale about Tristan Smith and Brother Mouse. It's set in the year 371. I don't know what it is. Again, I must have read this because this is 400 quite small print pages. I doubt. I mean, I'm asking: has anyone else ever read The Unusual Life of Tristan Smith? After that, I carried on going. We've got Jack Maggs by Peter Carey. This comes out. I bought this in 1998. This comes out in '97. So I definitely was in Israel when I bought this in a local bookshop because I'd read already. I was already 4 books in to Peter Carey, and so I bought the next one on the rank. And this is a kind of retelling of Great Expectations. So Jack Maggs is a kind of Magwitch, and there's a character sort of standing in for Pip. But I don't think I'd read Great Expectations when I read this, so some of this might have gone over my head. And it's sort of set in Victorian London, or is it set in Victorian Australia? Oh, Jack Maggs, raised and deported as a criminal, has returned from Australia. So he's back in London, having been deported. I don't remember. Jack Maggs. Anyone else ever read Jack Maggs by Peter Carey? I know I did, but I don't remember much about it. Then there's another book. And this, again, won the Booker Prize. This is the true history of the Kelly gang. The story by an Australian author of Ned Kelly. And this won the Booker in 2001. So he won in '88 and won again 13 years later in 2001. So this probably has been more widely read than Oscar Lucinda, maybe, but I don't know. Anyone read The True History of the Kelly Gang? Because I remember finding this also quite dense and tough to read, but it sort of rollicked along. And as I say, I'm still reading Peter Carey at this point. I've got 2 more books to go by Peter Carey. One of these is My Life as a Fake, which I pick up in 2004, and it's from that area. And this was I bought this from a book club. I was getting books sent to my parents in London, and then I would pick them up as and when, and this would have been so this is a kind of book club edition, sort of airport paperback edition. And I remember finding this after 3 or 4 quite dense novels. I remember finding this more accessible, similar, I guess, as my experience with Kazuo Ishiguro. So after the joy of The Remains of the Day, there were a couple of really dense novels that I struggled with, When We Were Orphans and what's the other one? The Unstoppables, the Unusuals, the Unthink. Hold on 1 second. The Unconsoled, not the Unusual, not the Unconsoled. Both When We Were Orphans and the Unconsoled, I've struggled with, like I did with Tristan Smith and Tax Inspector and Jack Maggs. And then this kind of was a return to something that felt familiar, or at least for this terrible reader, was more accessible and better understand. My Life as a Fake, and this is about faking art. And I think I was probably reading this about around the same time that I was very immersed in the Ripley series, which I know has just come on with the Hot Priest playing Ripley on Netflix. I haven't watched that yet. It's supposed to be very stylish, but I read all of Patricia Highsmith's the entire series, and there's a lot there about duality and faking, particularly art forgeries and the whole Derwent subplot that runs through more than one of those books. And I think this kind of was in conversation with that. I don't know if that's actually a real thing, but that was my sense that somehow faking art was seemed to be something that was in the air around about the time I was reading this. And then the last one that I've read was Theft, the Love Story, which I picked up probably secondhand. I don't know where I got this in 2010. So that's the last time I read Peter Carey. It was about 14 years ago, and he's continued to publish since. So I've got his other novels since then, which I just sort of dropped off his illegal self, and then Parrot and Olivier in America in 2010, I think was quite big. But then there've been 3 more novels since then. So 5 novels since Theft, the Love Story. But I kind of, that's it. After 8 Peter Carey novels, he, in no way was he somebody that I desperately wanted to track down and chase. I think, but somehow I ended up reading 8 books. So it kind of fits into that accidental authors model that I proposed. I think Oscar and Lucinda is a fantastic work. Illywhacker I remember very fondly, even though I haven't had the book in my possession for 30 years. And then those last 2 books I think were a return, and that's Peter Carey. But if anyone else has read him, is still reading him, has kept up with his last books, the man's 80 now. So I don't know if there's any more work to come from Peter Carey. I've read 8 of his novels, and I'm not quite sure how that happened. I'd love to hear your experiences with him. Take care. God bless. Bye.